The anime begins with a news report about the hot weather in Japan and a tragic incident involving the Tokyo Manji gang. A large truck had driven into a shopping district during a festival, causing injuries and deaths. Among the victims were Tochibana Naoto, a 25-year-old from Shibuya, and his older sister, Tochibana Hinata, who was 26. The news shocks Takemichi Hanagaki, who realizes that Hinata, his only girlfriend from middle school, is dead. Takemichi is a 26-year-old man living a miserable life. He works at a DVD rental store, where his younger manager constantly scolds him for being lazy and forgetful. Takemichi lives in a run-down apartment with thin walls, and his landlady frequently complains about his loud TV. His life feels like a series of failures, and he often finds himself apologizing for everything. He reflects on how his life peaked in middle school when he was part of a gang and had a girlfriend, Hinata. Now, he's a virgin, jobless, and feels like a loser. One day, while at the train station, Takemichi is pushed onto the tracks by a group of bullies. As he falls, he thinks about his life and how it all went wrong. Instead of dying, he suddenly finds himself transported back in time to his middle school days, 12 years earlier. He's back in his 14-year-old body, wearing his old school uniform and carrying a flip phone. Confused but determined, Takemichi decides to use this second chance to change his future. Takemichi reunites with his old friends, Akan, Yamagishi, Makoto, and Takuya. They're all part of a small gang, and Takemichi is reminded of how reckless and carefree they were. The group plans to pick a fight with some second-year students from another school, but things take a turn when they encounter a group of third-year delinquents from the Tokyo Manji gang. These older boys are much tougher, and Takemichi's friends are quickly intimidated. The leader of the third years, Kiyomasa, humiliates Takemichi and his friends, forcing them to apologize and join the Tokyo Manji gang as errand boys. Takemichi remembers how this event marked the beginning of his downward spiral. He and his friends were bullied and used by the gang, and he eventually left his hometown after middle school to escape the life of delinquency. However, his adult life didn't turn out any better. He worked menial jobs, constantly apologized for his mistakes, and felt like a failure. The only bright spot in his life was Hinata, but even that was taken away when she died in the future. Determined to change things, Takemichi seeks out Hinata's younger brother, Naoto. He tells Naoto about the future, explaining that both Hinata and Naoto will die in 12 years if nothing changes. Takemichi urges Naoto to protect his sister and remember the date of their deaths, July 1, 2017. Naoto is skeptical but agrees to help. Takemichi then wakes up in the present day, back in his 26-year-old body. He's in the infirmary at the train station, having survived the fall onto the tracks. To his surprise, Naoto is there, now a police officer. Naoto explains that Takemichi's actions in the past changed the future. Naoto survived and became a police officer to protect his sister, but despite his efforts, Hinata still died. Naoto begs Takemichi to help him save Hinata, believing that Takemichi has the power to change the future. Takemichi Hanagaki is a young man who feels like his life has gone completely off track. He lives in a rundown apartment, gets disrespected by his younger boss, and is constantly pushed around by others. His only relationship was back in middle school, and he can't help but wonder where everything went wrong. One day, something unbelievable happens. Takemichi finds himself transported back in time to his middle school days. Confused and shocked, he realizes he's reliving his past, but this time, he has a chance to change things. In the past, Takemichi reconnects with his old friends and his first love, Hinata Tochibana. He also meets Hinata's younger brother, Naoto, who becomes a key figure in his journey. Takemichi learns that in the future, both Hinata and Naoto will die tragically due to the actions of a dangerous gang called the Tokyo Manji gang. Determined to prevent this, Takemichi decides to use his newfound ability to travel through time to change the course of events. Naoto, now a detective in the future, helps Takemichi understand his power. He explains that Takemichi can travel back exactly 12 years into the past, and the trigger for this ability seems to be a handshake. Together, they devise a plan, Takemichi must go back to his middle school days and prevent the leaders of the Tokyo Manji gang, Sono Manjiro and Kisaki Teta, from meeting. If he can stop their alliance, the gang's violent future might be avoided, and Hinata's life could be saved. However, changing the past isn't easy. Takemichi finds himself in the middle of a brutal fight club run by delinquents from his school. He's beaten down and humiliated, but he refuses to give up. With the support of his friends, Aken, Yamagishi, Makoto, and Takuya, Takemichi begins to find the courage to stand up for himself and fight back. He realizes that he can't keep running away from his problems, both in the past and the present. In a pivotal moment, Takemichi challenges Kiyomasa, the leader of the fight club, to a fight. Despite being outmatched, Takemichi's determination inspires his friends and earns him a small measure of respect. He begins to understand that if he wants to change the future, he must first change himself. He can't rely on others to save him. He has to become stronger and face his fears head-on. As Takemichi navigates the dangerous world of middle school delinquents, he also reconnects with Hinata. Their bond grows stronger, and Takemichi vows to protect her no matter what. He realizes that his love for Hinata and his desire to save her are what drive him to keep fighting, even when the odds seem impossible. Takemichi knows he can't save Hinata by staying weak, so he challenges Masaotaka to a fight. Masaotaka lands the first hit, and Takemichi realizes how strong he is, but he refuses to give up. Seeing Takemichi getting beaten badly, Atsushi pulls out a knife, planning to stab Masaotaka. However, he notices the crowd has stopped cheering for Masaotaka. Even though he's badly hurt, Takemichi keeps fighting, mumbling about how weak he was for the past 12 years. Atsushi tells him to give up since he's already proven his toughness, but Takemichi refuses. He tells Masaotaka that if he wants to win, he'll have to kill him because he's not giving up. Surprised, Masaotaka asks for his bat, even though it was supposed to be a fistfight. Just then, Ken Ryuguji, the vice leader of the Tokyo Manji gang, appears and tells Masaotaka to calm down because he's scaring everyone. Behind him, Manjiro Sono, the gang's leader, casually mentions his out of dorayaki. While Takemichi's friends wonder who Manjiro is, everyone else bows in respect. Manjiro walks toward the ring, ignoring a delinquent who tries to introduce himself. Ken explains that Manjiro doesn't talk to people he's not interested in. When Masaotaka greets Manjiro, Ken suddenly kicks him in the stomach and tells him to show more respect. Manjiro then walks up to Takemichi and asks for his name but repeats it as Takemichi. He wonders if Takemichi is really in middle school. Then, out of nowhere, Manjiro tells Takemichi that from now on, they are friends, shocking him. He then turns to Masaotaka and asks if he's in charge of the fights. When Masaotaka says yes, Manjiro kicks him in the face and beats him up. He then finds the fight club boring and leaves, telling Masaotaka not to ruin the Tokyo Manji gang's name. Later, Kazushi and Makoto are excited that Takemichi made friends with Manjiro, but Takemichi panics. He went from being Masaotaka's slave to being stuck with a monster. Atsushi admits he was going to stab Masaotaka because otherwise, they would have remained slaves. But thanks to Takemichi, they are free now. The next morning, Takemichi meets Hinata, who invites him on a date before her cram school. During class, Takemichi wonders what to do next. He met Manjiro, but now he needs to stop him from meeting Teta. Suddenly, Manjiro barges into the classroom, asking Takemichi to come out and play, shocking him. When he steps outside, he sees a group of third years beaten up. Ken explains that they made him angry, so he beat them and now makes them lie on the ground while he and Manjiro walk over them. Manjiro wants Takemichi to hang out, but he refuses, saying he's busy. Before they can convince him, Hinata sees them and misunderstands the situation, thinking they are bullying Takemichi. She boldly walks up and slaps Manjiro. Then she grabs Takemichi's hand, trying to take him away, but Ken stops them. Hinata scolds them, saying that real friends wouldn't force Takemichi into anything. She also warns them that if they're the reason he's been getting beaten up, she'll stop it. Takemichi, determined, places his hand on Ken and tells him to let Hinata go. He declares that there are things he won't give up ever again. Manjiro is impressed but asks Takemichi how he wants to die. Takemichi only asks for a promise that they won't hurt Hinata. Manjiro laughs, saying he doesn't care and pretends to throw a punch but stops just before hitting him, saying he was joking, he would never hit a girl. Ken laughs, saying Takemichi actually threatened Manjiro, but it's fine because protecting a girl is old school. After learning that they're friends, Hinata apologizes to Manjiro, who tells her not to worry but to take care of herself. She then tells Takemichi they can go on a date another time so he can be with his friends. Later, while riding bikes, Takemichi remembers how Naoto warned him about all the terrible things the Tokyo Manji gang will do in the future. He wonders if Manjiro is really capable of such evil. Curious, he asks Manjiro why he likes him. Manjiro explains that Takemichi reminds him of his older brother, who was reckless and picked fights with people much stronger than him. He shares how, in the past, biker gangs fought all the time but always cleaned up their own messes. He doesn't think that was lame, and now he wants to create a new era for delinquents. He wants Takemichi to be part of it. Ken adds that while there are plenty of strong fighters, not many people stand up for something they truly believe in. As Takemichi walks home, he thinks that Manjiro doesn't seem like the type of guy who would kill someone like Hinata. He wonders what could have happened to turn the Tokyo Manji gang so dark. Lost in thought, he walks past a group of guys and suddenly feels like he has seen one of them before. On the train, Hinata sees some noisy students taking up too much space and scolds them to make room for an older lady to sit. Afterward, she invites Takemichi to her house to help him study. Takemichi is excited because it's the first time he's been in a girl's room. Hinata thanks Takemichi for helping her brother Naoto and talks about how their dad is often missing. Naoto didn't like him at first, but suddenly he said he wanted to be a police officer, just like Takemichi. Takemichi realizes this is why Naoto chose to be a cop and tells Hinata that Naoto will be a great officer. Hinata says Takemichi seems more mature than before and wants to know more about him. Suddenly, fireworks start, and Hinata takes Takemichi to the roof to enjoy the view. Takemichi is happy and doesn't want to go back to the future, because Hinata won't be there. He reaches to hold her hand but realizes he's holding Naoto's hand instead, and he returns to the present. Back in the present, Takemichi wakes up crying. Naoto realizes that Takemichi's time travel works differently. When Takemichi travels back, his body stays frozen, and the same amount of time passes in both the past and the present. Takemichi tells Naoto he met Manjiro Sono, and Naoto wonders why Takemichi didn't kill him when he had the chance. Takemichi suggests they go to see Manjiro to learn why Tomon changed. Naoto agrees and notices that Takemichi seems much stronger now. As they go through old files, they find out that Atsushi Sendo is now a high-ranking member of Tomon. Naoto is confused because in his timeline, Atsushi was arrested and became a nobody after stabbing Masotaka Kiyomizu. They realize Takemichi must have changed the past after meeting Manjiro, so they decide to contact Atsushi. Takemichi finds Atsushi's old phone number, hoping it hasn't changed, and calls him. He recalls that Atsushi once said they'd be friends forever. When Atsushi answers, Takemichi arranges to meet him at a hostess bar he runs. When they meet, Takemichi barely recognizes Atsushi because he's no longer wearing his pompadour. Atsushi greets him and says he's been waiting for him to show up. He wants to talk privately, so they head to the rooftop. They talk about the good times they shared, and Takemichi comments that Atsushi seems to have a great life now. But Atsushi says that there are things you can't buy. Atsushi reveals that he knows Naoto is a cop and that is Hinata's brother. Then, Atsushi drops a bombshell. He was the one who pushed Takemichi onto the train tracks, but Naoto saved him, just like he knew Takemichi would fall. Atsushi asks Takemichi if he can go back to the past and help, though he knows it sounds crazy. Takemichi is hurt and refuses to believe that his friend would try to kill him. Atsushi reveals that he is working for Teta Kisaki, and everyone in Tomon listens to him now. He says that Tomon changed after Ken Ryuguji died and pleads with Takemichi to go back and save everyone. After making this request, Atsushi jumps off the rooftop and dies, leaving Takemichi crying. Meanwhile, Teta Kisaki is seen nearby, listening to their conversation. Takemichi tells Naoto that they need to investigate the day Ken Ryuguji died, because Teta Kisaki is the one who turned Tomon evil. Takemichi then makes up his mind. He will go back and save everyone. Takemichi goes to work, but his boss, Hasegawa, tells him he's fired because he disappeared for 2 weeks. She even got in trouble for covering for him. Takemichi asks about his salary, and Hasegawa says he'll still get paid soon. Takemichi wonders if he should tell Hinata from the past about the future, but Naoto warns him not to. He says Hinata might think he's crazy and avoid him. Naoto himself only believed Takemichi's story because he used to be interested in supernatural things. With Atsushi Sendo dead, they have no choice but to go back in time again. Naoto looks up old news about Ken Ryuguji's death. On August 3, 2005, Ken was in a big fight involving 50 bikers. He got stabbed and died because of problems between him and Manjiro. Takemichi finds it hard to believe since Ken and Manjiro were very close. Naoto thinks there's more to the story and says that Takemichi's mission is to save Ken. If Ken survives, Manjiro won't change, and Hinata and Atsushi won't die. They agree on the plan and shake hands. When Takemichi opens his eyes, he's back in the past, in a karaoke room with a half-naked girl on top of him. The phone rings, and as she picks it up, Takemichi panics and runs out. He realizes things in the past have changed but doesn't want Hinata to know. Suddenly, Hinata appears behind him and asks what he's hiding. She says he's been acting weird lately. On the night of the fireworks, he left without a word and became cold toward her, but now he seems like his old self again. Then, Ken calls Takemichi and tells him to come to Musashi Shrine. Hinata decides to go with him. As they walk, Hinata asks Takemichi what's most important to him. She says, for her, it's moments like this, just spending time together, even if they don't talk about anything important. Takemichi realizes his top priority is saving Hinata. When they arrive at the shrine, a group of bikers is there. 2 of them yell at Takemichi to leave because this is a Tomon gang meeting. Takemichi tries to explain that he was invited, but they don't believe him. Takashi Mitsuya, the 2nd Division captain, recognizes Takemichi and scolds them for being rude. He takes Takemichi to Manjiro, who is happy to see him. Ken, however, says Takemichi shouldn't have brought Hinata. Takemichi didn't know it was a gang gathering. Ken then calls Emma and asks her to look after Hinata. Takemichi is shocked to see Emma. It's the girl from the karaoke room. She teases him, calling him wussy boy. Hinata is confused, wondering what that means, and Ken asks if Takemichi knows Emma. Takemichi nervously says he doesn't remember anything. Emma playfully says that Takemichi made her take off her clothes and then ran away. This makes Hinata furious, and she punches Takemichi before storming off. Emma laughs and says she only did it to get Ken's attention, hoping he would get jealous. But Ken only cares about Manjiro, bikes, and fighting. The Tomon meeting begins, and Manjiro asks everyone's opinion on their conflict with the Moebius gang. Parchin and Payan are still mad at Takemichi for what happened with Masaotaka Kiyomizu. Takashi tells them to drop it, but Parchin insists he doesn't understand why. Ken tells them to be quiet and tells Takemichi not to be mad at Parchin. He's just upset because his friend got into trouble with Moebius. Takashi explains that Moebius leader, Nobutoka Ozanai, attacked Parchin's friend for a dumb reason. He beat him up, hurt his girlfriend, stole his money, and even threatened his family. Moebius controls Shinjuku, while Tomon controls Shibuya. Manjiro asks Parchin what he wants to do. Parchin knows a fight will hurt Tomon, but is too angry to let it go. He wants revenge. Manjiro expected this answer and asks the gang if they're scared or if they think it's too much trouble. But instead of backing down, they all grin. Manjiro then shouts that they will crush Moebius on August 3rd at the Musashi Festival. Later, Takemichi lies in bed thinking. According to Naoto, Ken is supposed to die on August 3rd in a gang fight within Tomon. But now, on that same day, they are fighting Moebius instead. Unsure of what to do, Takemichi decides to become Ken's personal bodyguard. But the next day, Ken refuses. Takemichi follows him anyway and sees him eating at a restaurant with Manjiro. Manjiro gets upset that his kid's meal doesn't have a flag, so Ken pulls one out of his pocket to cheer him up. After eating, Manjiro falls asleep, and Ken carries him. They go to the hospital to visit Parchin's friend's girlfriend, who has been unconscious for 5 days. Her father shows up and yells at them, blaming them for what happened. Ken bows his head, while Manjiro tells him there's no need since they didn't do anything wrong. The father keeps shouting, and Manjiro gets angry, but Ken pushes Manjiro's head down and tells him to be quiet. Ken takes responsibility, and the father starts crying before leaving. Ken tells Manjiro that they will handle their problems in their own way. He reminds him that every member of Tamon has people they care about, and they can't let innocent people get hurt. Manjiro doesn't need to bow to anyone, but he must have a kind heart. Manjiro apologizes and is glad that Ken is always by his side. Listening from the side, Takemichi finally understands why Manjiro changed after Ken's death. He now believes that those two would never fight each other. Ken Ryuguji, also known as Draken, was born in the red light district of Shibuya and lived in a brothel. He never knew his father, and his mother, who was a prostitute, eventually abandoned him. Because he was taller than most kids, he looked intimidating and started calling himself Draken. In 5th grade, he got a tattoo on his head and began winning fights, making others afraid of him. However, there was a gang called the Samayama crew, who were stronger and had beaten him before. One day, Samayama tells Ken about another kid who is acting tough, Mikey from 7th middle school. They order Ken to bring Mikey to them. Ken doesn't want to disobey but is also excited about the chance to fight Mikey. Ken goes looking for Mikey and finally finds him, but he is surprised. Mikey is much smaller than he expected. Ken isn't sure if he should fight him but tells him that some older kids want to meet him. However, Ken says he won't force him. To Ken's surprise, Mikey agrees to go just because Ken asked him. When they arrive, Mikey suddenly runs forward and kicks Samayama, knocking him down and scaring the rest of the gang. Mikey then turns to Ken, recognizing him as Draken from 4th middle school. He asks why Ken is hanging out with those guys and says he wants to be friends with him. Meanwhile, Takemichi wants to learn more about Moebius, so he returns to the present. He tells Naoto that he doesn't believe Mikey and Draken would ever fight. He asks Naoto to track down Nobutoka Ozanai, the former leader of Moebius, to find out what really happened between Tomon and Moebius. Naoto finds Nobutoka at a construction site. They see him getting yelled at for being late, which surprises them since he used to be Moebius commander. When they finally talk to him, Nobutoka at first refuses to discuss the fight. However, he strongly denies ordering Ken's death. Instead, he reveals that while they didn't kill Ken, the incident led to internal conflicts within Tomon. It was all planned by someone else. Before leaving, Nobutoka says that if Ken had survived, his own life wouldn't have been ruined. Naoto believes him because he looked genuinely shaken. They realize that someone used Nobutoka to break Tomon apart. Determined to stop this, Takemichi returns to the past to warn Mikey. When Takemichi wakes up, he's on the back of a bike with Atsushi Sendo. He's relieved to see Atsushi is still alive. Curious, he asks if Atsushi has any dreams. Atsushi shares that he wants to become a hairstylist. Takemichi encourages him and says he believes in him. After that, Takemichi goes to see Mikey, who is with Ken, Parchin, and Payan. Takemichi urgently asks Mikey to cancel the fight with Moebius, warning that someone is setting them up. But he can't explain how he knows. Parchin gets angry, shoves Takemichi aside, and threatens to kill him if he keeps talking. Takemichi refuses to back down, which makes Parchin furious. He starts beating up Takemichi. Mikey stays firm and says they will fight Moebius because he has already made up his mind. Ken stops Parchin from hitting Takemichi anymore and suggests that maybe they should investigate Moebius first. This makes Mikey wonder if Ken is against Tomon. Just then, Nobutoka Ozanai appears and demands respect, reminding them that he is 2 years older. Parchin, already angry, rushes at him, but Nobutoka knocks him down with a single punch. He mocks them, calling them the Middle School Baby Alliance. He says he heard they wanted to fight Moebius, so he decided to bring the fight to them. Suddenly, more Moebius gang members appear, surrounding the Tomon group. Moebius surrounds the Tomon members. Takemichi looks at Nobutoka Ozanai and can't believe this is the same man he met in the present. Nobutoka suddenly punches Takemichi, thinking he was looking down on him. Before things get worse, Parchin steps in and starts fighting Nobutoka. Manjiro tells everyone to stay back, saying, "This is Pa's fight." Parchin tries his best, but Nobutoka is too strong and beats him easily. Just before Parchin hits the ground, Manjiro catches him. Parchin feels embarrassed and apologizes, calling himself useless, but Manjiro tells him he hasn't lost yet. The Moebius gang laughs at them, but Manjiro calmly walks up to Nobutoka and knocks him out with a single kick. Then, he challenges the rest of Moebius, daring anyone who thinks Parchin lost to fight him next. He tells them that as long as he's with Tomon, no one in Tomon will ever lose. Even though he's badly beaten, Nobutoka somehow gets up. He grabs a broken bottle and charges at Ken and Manjiro, but Ken easily stops him. Ken tells Nobutoka that he lost because he abandoned the true delinquent code, hurting innocent people, attacking parents, and mistreating women. Seeing how strong Manjiro and Ken are, the Moebius members start to panic. Ken then declares that Moebius will now belong to Tomon. Just then, the sound of police sirens fills the air, and everyone starts running. Takemichi remembers what Nobutoka said about this fight being the trigger for something bigger. But since everything seems to have ended peacefully, he wonders if he's missing something. Suddenly, Parchin stabs Nobutoka in the back, shocking everyone. He declares that he won't let Ozanai get away so easily. Then, Parchin apologizes to Manjiro, tells everyone to run, and turns himself in. While escaping, Takemichi loses consciousness. When Takemichi wakes up, he finds Emma sitting beside him. His first thought is about Manjiro and Ken, so he asks how they are doing. Emma, crying, tells him that they fought because of Parchin, and now Tomon is split into two groups, Manjiro's faction and Ken's faction. As Emma cries on Takemichi's lap, Hinata walks in and misunderstands the situation. Takemichi stays at home for 3 days, bored out of his mind. He even finishes a huge puzzle to pass the time. His friends visit him and bring bad news. Tomon is falling apart and might break up. But then, they start laughing and say that Manjiro and Ken always fight like this. Just then, Ken arrives, carrying a watermelon, shocking everyone. As they eat, Ken tells them that Parchin will be in jail for a year, but Nobutoka survived. Takemichi asks about Manjiro, and Ken's expression changes. He suddenly slams the table in anger, ruining Takemichi's puzzle. He declares that he's done with Manjiro and that Tomon is breaking apart, then storms out. As Ken leaves, Manjiro arrives. The two stare at each other and ask, "What are you doing here?" Both answer, "I came to see Takemichi. He's my friend," but instead of settling things, they start arguing again. Takemichi tries to stop them, but Ken gets annoyed. Suddenly, Manjiro grabs Takemichi's bike and throws it at Ken. Ken dodges, and the bike crashes against the wall, breaking into pieces. Furious, Ken picks up Takemichi's baseball bat, the one he used to hit a home run, and snaps it in half. As they keep fighting, they accidentally destroy Takemichi's things one by one. He watches in horror as his precious belongings get wrecked. Finally, as they are about to punch each other, Takemichi, unable to hold back anymore, yells at them to stop. Takemichi gets angry as Manjiro and Ken break his things and yells at them to stop. They both realize they went too far and didn't even notice when they destroyed everything. Takemichi tries to punch Manjiro, but he dodges, and Takemichi falls straight into the trash. Ken apologizes and asks him to calm down. Takemichi tells them they don't care about the people around them and their fight will end up splitting Tomon. Manjiro then points out that Takemichi has garbage on his head, and before Takemichi can react, he and Ken run away laughing. Takemichi's friends also run off, unable to handle the smell. After washing up, Takemichi joins Manjiro and Ken, who have already made up and apologize for their behavior. Manjiro says he doesn't even remember what they were fighting about. Takemichi guesses it was because of Parchin. Manjiro wanted to help him despite his crime, while Ken wanted to respect Parchin's decision to turn himself in. With Manjiro and Ken no longer fighting, Takemichi realizes he has changed history, and Ken won't die. Just then, Hinata and Emma arrive. Hinata asks Takemichi if he's free on August 3rd and invites him to the festival. He happily agrees. Emma, seeing Manjiro and Ken together again, realizes they have reconciled. On August 3rd, Takemichi, Hinata, Emma, and Ken go to the festival. Hinata cheers for Emma, knowing that Ken doesn't pick up on her hints. She also understands why Emma was with Takemichi earlier but hasn't fully forgiven him for what looked like cheating. She tells Takemichi that she'll forgive him if he wins her a special prize at the shooting game. Takemichi tries his hardest and manages to hit the target but fails to knock it down, so he doesn't win. As it starts to rain, Takemichi and Hinata run to take shelter under a tree. Hinata's Jita, wooden sandals, are too big, and she loses balance, but Takemichi catches her in time. While standing close together, Hinata tells him she forgives him since he tried so hard. Takemichi realizes this is the perfect moment for a kiss and leans in, only for his phone to ring. Annoyed, he sees that Kazushi is calling. But when he answers, Kazushi warns him to tell Ken to be careful. Some of Manjiro's supporters are planning to attack Ken, and even though Manjiro and Ken are fine now, their factions are still on edge. Takemichi realizes the conflict isn't over. Takemichi quickly apologizes to Hinata and runs off to find Ken. While searching, he stumbles upon a group of Tomon members talking to a Moebius guy. The Moebius guy hands Masaotaka Kiyomizu a blade, and Masaotaka declares that he's going to kill Ken. Before Takemichi can react, one of Masaotaka's men spots him and drags him to their leader. Masaotaka orders Takemichi to go buy them drinks, but when Takemichi refuses, they start beating him up. As he gets hit again and again, Takemichi realizes that he hasn't actually gotten stronger. He only felt that way because he was always around Manjiro and Ken. Once they are done, Masaotaka ties him up with duct tape and leaves him there. A little while later, Hinata finds Takemichi and rips the duct tape off his mouth. Takemichi starts crying, saying that no matter how hard he tries, he can't save anyone. If he were as strong as Manjiro or Ken, he could have fought back, but he feels worthless. Hinata suddenly kisses him and tells him it was her first kiss. She says she gave it to him because he is special to her. She tells him that even though he gets frustrated over others, that's what makes him the coolest person she knows. Takemichi stops crying, and Hinata helps untie him. Regaining his resolve, he decides to go stop Masaotaka. On his way, Takemichi runs into Takashi Mitsuya and tells him that Ken is about to be attacked. To Takemichi's surprise, Takashi already knows, but he expected Pain to be the attacker, not Masaotaka. Takashi then reveals that Manjiro wanted to use money to bail Parchin out of jail, but Ken was against the idea. He is surprised that Takemichi was the one who managed to stop Manjiro and Ken's fight, especially when even their captains couldn't. He thanks Takemichi, saying that if they had kept fighting, it could have destroyed Tomon. However, he explains that while most of Tomon accepted that they couldn't do anything about Parchin, Pain still refused to accept it. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Pain finds Ken and Emma. While searching for Ken Ryuguji, Takashi explains to Takemichi that Pain feels like Tomon abandoned Parchin. Out of anger, Pain teamed up with some Moebius members to take down Ken. When Ken sees Pain, he immediately understands that he is upset and gets ready to fight him. However, before the fight can begin, a Moebius member suddenly attacks Ken from behind with a bat. As Ken struggles, Takemichi remembers Naoto's words about Ken's attack happening in a parking lot. He quickly heads there with Takashi and finds Ken fighting off multiple Moebius members. Ken, exhausted from the battle, sits on the ground and tells Takashi to take care of things. Suddenly, they hear the sound of a motorcycle approaching. It's Manjiro Sono. Manjiro steps off his bike and quickly realizes he was lured somewhere else on purpose so that Pain could be alone with Ken and try to break Tomon apart. But Manjiro wonders who tricked Pain into doing this. Just then, Shuji Hanma appears and introduces himself as the temporary leader of Moebius. He mocks Manjiro, saying he isn't just about strength. Manjiro immediately attempts to kick Shuji in the head, but Shuji blocks it. He then reveals his real plan, to destroy Tomon by making them fight against each other. But now, since that didn't fully work, he's fine with just taking down Manjiro himself. Shuji then calls over 100 Moebius members and warns them not to run, or he will hunt them down and knock out all their teeth. Takemichi realizes he has changed history, but instead of stopping the fight, he has caused an even bigger conflict. As Moebius prepares to fight the 4 Tomon members, the rest of Tomon arrives on bikes, ready to back them up. The battle begins, and while chaos unfolds, Takemichi runs through the crowd, searching for Ken. He knows he has to protect him from Masotaka Kiyomizu. Meanwhile, Manjiro approaches Pain and asks why he attacked Ken, even though they had already settled things. Pain refuses to accept that Tomon has given up on Parchin and starts punching Manjiro in frustration. Pain shouts that Parchin was everything to him, and if Tomon won't stand by him, then he has no choice but to become their enemy. He knows that Manjiro could take him down with a single hit, but he wonders why Manjiro isn't fighting back. Instead, Manjiro pulls Pain's head close and asks him if he has ever seen him smile about Parchin getting arrested. Takemichi had told Manjiro that he would be sad if Tomon broke apart because of this fight. Manjiro had never truly thought about what would happen if Tomon turned against each other. He tells Pain to keep hitting him if it will make him feel better, but he also says he doesn't want to fight his own family. He asks Pain to come back to them. While running through the fight, Takemichi finally spots Masotaka. He is about to stop him, but then he sees something horrifying. Masotaka is holding a bloody blade, muttering over and over, "I did it. I did it." Takemichi quickly turns around and sees Ken lying on the ground, bleeding. Takemichi finds Ken lying on the ground, stabbed and bleeding. Panicked, he rushes to inform Manjiro, who immediately tries to get to Ken. However, Shuji Hanma steps in his way and blocks him, forcing Manjiro into a fight. Realizing that Shuji won't let him through, Manjiro yells at Takemichi to take care of Ken. Seeing that Ken is still alive, Takemichi lifts him onto his back and starts carrying him towards safety. Just then, Hinata and Emma appear and tell him they have already called for an ambulance. As Takemichi struggles to carry Ken, he notices Masotaka Kiyomizu and his gang approaching. Fear creeps in, but before he can react, Ken wakes up and weakly thanks Takemichi for helping him. He then tells him to take Hinata and Emma and run. Takemichi realizes that Ken must have sensed his hesitation. He remembers how his life fell apart because he always ran away. Now, given a second chance, he refuses to make the same mistake. Instead of fleeing, he steps forward and faces Masotaka, declaring that he won't run and is here for revenge. He reminds Masotaka that their fight isn't over, as he never truly lost. Masotaka is surprised by Takemichi's determination but gets irritated when Ken, Hinata, and Emma bet that Takemichi will win. Takemichi charges at Masotaka, aiming for a punch, but Masotaka suddenly stabs him in the arm. He mocks Takemichi, saying this isn't a fair fight, it's an execution. Takemichi stumbles but refuses to give up. He remembers his old dream of becoming the top delinquent in Japan, a dream that Masotaka crushed. However, he now realizes that it was his own weakness that stopped him from ever trying again. Fueled by this realization, he tackles Masotaka and bites him. Masotaka struggles and punches Takemichi, trying to break free, but Takemichi clings onto him, refusing to let go. He manages to get onto Masotaka's back and begins choking him. Even though he isn't as strong as Manjiro, Takemichi declares that he is Takemichi Hanagaki and won't back down. As he tightens his grip, Masotaka starts losing consciousness until he finally passes out. Takemichi has won. Masotaka's gang quickly prepares to attack Takemichi in retaliation. Struggling to stay on his feet, Takemichi tells Hinata to take Emma and run. As the girls leave, Takemichi, exhausted, looks at Ken and asks if he ever wonders what heaven looks like. Ken, still weak but grinning, replies that he isn't going to heaven, he's going to hell. Just as Masotaka's gang charges at them, Atsushi suddenly appears and lands a powerful punch on one of them, making him drop his knife. Right behind him, Makoto, Takuya, and Kazushi rush in and stand in front of Takemichi and Ken, ready to fight. Atsushi explains that Hinata contacted him. They all jump into battle against Masotaka's gang but quickly start getting beaten down. Despite this, they refuse to give up, inspired by Takemichi's earlier fight against Masotaka. As they continue struggling against their opponents, the sound of ambulance sirens fills the air. Takemichi, battered and exhausted, grins, realizing that they have won.